Charlie, good to see you as always. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. You're working in a really important area. I think it's really important anyway. And I appreciate you coming to talk about that. So, just for the folks that are listening, let's start with tell us about what you're trying to achieve. Tell us about the mission.
So there are a tremendous number of very technical, highly brilliant people attempting to transition global businesses, global governments, the general public away from a kind of highly carbonized economy, right? So in order to do something about climate change, we've got to decarbonize. There are three pieces of the triangle: governments, citizens, companies. We focus on companies because we think that's where you can have the biggest shift the quickest and where the mandate's the biggest. Why is the mandate the biggest? Well, because the finance and the insurance have kind of moved. So if you want to be insured and bankrolled, you're going to need to have a decarbonisation strategy. So those are places where they've said, we want to do this. We're still working out how. And you've got really technical people who are making those changes happen. And there's a problem in that change doesn't happen based on data and facts. Change is a very irrational process for people. So what we do is we basically help those change makers in organizations to use the kind of the skills from psychology to take people with them in change.
Okay. And when was the moment? Tell me about the moment when you thought this business that we're building, this project, could have a global impact. Tell us about that moment when you realised that was the case.
I don't think I did. I don't. There was a moment, and I think I was building a global business from the beginning, and that's because the business I built before this was based in West Africa. So um,
Because the
I,
born
I
global idea, you're born that way.
maybe. I mean, I just always had global clients. So I ran a creative agency in West Africa, and we had clients on four continents. We were a tiny company, but that's just where our clients were. They were the UN agencies in Italy, and they were the big charities in the UK and Europe. It wasn't, and the UN in New York. They weren't. We didn't go out looking for them. We had their bases in country, and then we ended up working with their head offices as well. And so it just was natural to work with lots of different time zones, lots of different languages. It wasn't a difficulty. So when we started this business, we were naturally attracting people from around the world, actually. I'd be a massive fraud to say we went out and got clients globally. They came and found us, which is a wonderful situation to be in. But I think probably we already had that muscle of just being used to working. We were all used to working on Zoom long before the pandemic. We were all used to working with different time zones and asking the question about what time are you on, and what are there any religious festivals we need to be aware of, and all those kinds of questions that maybe make other people trip other people up. And I guess I also see a tremendous opportunity to overcome the natural enemy of business, which is scarcity. When you fish in a small pool, you can get very anxious. You can start to feel like there's not enough clients. I've got to be super competitive against other people. When you're looking to draw clients from across the world, you could be quite relaxed about it.
Yeah, yeah. Fishing in a bigger pond. Yeah. And it's a tough gig though. What is it that motivates you to, because it involves an awful lot of energy and effort, getting up early to talk to people on the other side of the planet or going to bed late after talking to them or whatever. What is it that motivates you?
So solving real problems. I mean, that we're a B corporation for a reason. It's all about impact. My co-founder and I both have little kids. We said early on, this can't be just for profit. That's just not interesting enough. We can't be just flogging ourselves, all day, every day, unless it's actually making a difference. And we both work in climate change because we have little kids, and we want to make a difference to the
It's
future.
about a legacy, really.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess it doesn't really matter to me where a client comes from as long as they've got a real problem. And we spend quite a lot of time in diagnostic conversations with people to make sure that we can actually help them. Um, but yeah, I think that's probably what motivates me. And I like the feeling that we're doing things all over the world. So one of my favorite contracts probably is a good example of what motivates me. One of my favorite contracts I didn't deliver some of my team did, which is working with C40 cities who are Bloomberg put them together. They're a group of mayors from 40 cities around the world. They have a program called the Women for Climate program. They have social entrepreneurs in those 40 cities, and they range from New York to Buenos Aires to I think even Sierra Leone, where I used to live, is in it. And we would never have found those women without that program.
Mm.
So we plugged in some of our training to a bigger program of theirs. So they managed the whole program. It was a dream come true for us. They managed the program. We just kind of plug in, deliver something that they found really useful. They told us, which is good. Taught them how to influence better. Taught them how to overcome objections to change, which is a lot of what we're doing. Met people who really needed those skills to work with the town hall in Buenos Aires, and they accessed something that they couldn't afford, and we accessed people we couldn't find. And that for me is like that's it. That's the kind of golden,
I mean, I
key.
can see the joy in that. I mean, absolutely, I get that. I mean, let me just ask you a quick question though. I know you started out thinking this is going to be a global thing. What did you think the crux problem was that you'd have to overcome to be able to get to that impact?
It's a good one. Well, I mean, there's an obvious one, which is finding clients. Because if you don't know the terrain, you're not in that place. But I guess what I'd learned from my creative agency was it's all about people. So it's sort of building relationships, and then when someone leaves an organization, don't be sad about that. Find out where they're going and go with them. And also, who else do they know? If you do work that people resonate with, and hopefully we deliver good work, people tell us they like what we do. So they like what we do and they like why we do it. People really get the idea that this is a people change problem, not an environment change problem, and that we need people change skills. And they go, great, have you got any? And we go, yeah, we've got this whole suite of change skills. They go, great, fantastic. So then they tell other people who they know. So for example, we've done like 3 or 4 things in Canada, and I still don't know how. And well, I do know how. The reason is that people have told other people, and then someone said, "Oh, I got your name from so and so at so and so," and they said that you might be able to help with. And then suddenly we've got all these Canadian organizations on our website that we didn't actually actively go out and look for. So I think that's the finding clients is always the obvious one. I think the the difficulty I come up against sometimes, which has put me off certain territories, is more legal. It's more tax and legal right to work questions, and we want to stay like not on the line of the law, but firmly behind like a long way back from the front line of the law. And so that has sometimes made us overcautious about certain places because we're worried that unless we have huge amounts of money for lawyers, which we don't, we won't get the right advice. We might get, bad advice and do something that puts us on the wrong side.
Mm. And you don't want to, I mean, and that, of course, has lots of reputational damage potential, doesn't it? I mean, we were just talking about that. I mean, just looking at the other side of the coin, I mean, what would you say are the factors that have made the business successful? Is it purely about the joy, or I mean, what is it that's made you successful on a global scale?
I think we're doing something a little bit different, which has also been what's made made it hard. So we invented a category, which is a bit of a problem. We invented climate change coaching. So then we had to train
Explain
people.
what it was.
Yeah, exactly. Sustainability, which is our main kind of area, if you had to put us in an area, is a highly technical area. So there's loads and loads of training and counting stuff and assessing stuff, but not very much in soft skills.
Mm.
So we've had to do quite a lot at helping people understand what it is. And we did a big piece of research with Oxford Brookes last year, for example. And one of the really great stats that came out of that was that only 8% of respondents in the big survey we did said that their technical skills were more important than their soft skills. And
Mm.
we've used that everywhere as a kind of like, look, guys, your sector recognizes this as a problem. So yeah, I suppose what's made us successful is everyone loves psychology. Everyone gets it. This is about psychology. Everybody wants to be better at psychology. I think we all want to be better at influencing. People enjoy our trainings because they're so accessible, because it's about how we tick as humans. It's not about how good you are with stats and data. So, and also the other thing actually is that if you're an introvert, you do very well on our trainings because introverts listen better often, not always, but
They're
better.
pretty important skills in that context, aren't
And that's a lot of what we're teaching. And a lot of people in sustainability are more introverted than extroverted because they've come into that space through the kind of data and reporting route.
they? Mm.
And so it's like a massive relief to them to be told, actually, it's not about charisma and being able to be like the sage on the stage. It's actually about being able to ask really good questions and listen more deeply than other people. And then, once we give them some tools that they can, apply those skills to, then they're off.
Mm.
So yeah. Plus,
It's also it's a different way of thinking about the problem, I think.
yes, and yes, that's a much better way of saying it. We essentially we've had to train people to see the problem differently. Yeah.
Now you're successful now. I mean, I know your journey hasn't finished. You've got big plans, I know that, but you're pretty successful now. I mean, were there moments when you thought this really isn't going to work? I mean, have you had those kind of days? Like, I mean, a lot of
Probably
us.
last Tuesday. I mean, I mean, all the time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because all the time you're reaching for something else, so you have to keep there's somebody told me, you don't say, oh God, I have to, you say I get to. And if I on the days when I grumble about where we are now, if I think back to 6 years ago when we started and think like that was in our wildest dreams and now we get to have that problem, so that's there's you do, but the problem is as you get better and better at stuff, you want more and more and more, so you have to keep remembering where you've come from. But yeah, I think it's always there's always hurdles to overcome. And I suppose the other thing is, I mean, we've bootstrapped this business largely,
Mm.
and we've made some what now turn out to be quite clever decisions, often by accident or by gut. Like, actually, that feels wrong. Let's do it that way. And
Mm.
later on, we can say why they were the right decisions. Like the category problem, for example. Um, our first thing was training coaches, which lots of people said, why are you training your competition? And I had that question mark in the back of my head, but I didn't like the idea of seeing other coaches as competition. I thought, well, look, this job needs doing. The more people that can do it, the better, to be honest.
Yeah.
And actually, that turns out now, from a business perspective, to have been a very good move because we created more people in the category to go and talk about the category.
Yeah.
So so there are sorts of things that along the way we said this is really this doesn't work, or this is hard. What do we do about it? But we sort of kept going where the gut felt right, and it probably worked out.
Yeah. That's good to hear. And in terms of you talked a little bit earlier about being bolder. I mean, were there moments when you thought, or certainly looking back on it now, perhaps when you thought perhaps we should have been a bit bolder around that? Is any of those moments as you look back?
Loads. I mean, I think as women as well, we can often pull our punches. um I
And what?
don't
Let me just ask you about that. Why? I mean, I know you quite well, and you don't strike me as somebody that pulls her punches. Just tell me more about that.
um well, I mean, if someone says I can't, I won't. I will. Like, there's no doubt about it. I can be quite bloody minded when it comes to like, no,
Mm.
don't. No one tells me I can't. But it's not. It's not that. It's more retreating to safety. It's what Richard Branson calls always cover the downside. So I will always go, what's the worst can happen here, and how do we protect that from happening? So we can take that risk, knowing that. So we have quite a lot of reserves. And the reason we have a lot of reserves is that my previous business had like, fumes. And so the car was always about to run out of fuel. And I was like, never again. So there's things like that we've sort of tried to build in. And maybe if we'd been bolder, we would have done the whole take a 6 slide deck to an investor on day one and say, we've got this hunch, give us 400 grand. And instead we said, I think we want to know it works first. And so we've spent 6 years like making it work. But there's also something which is about like the sort of lazy impatience, sort of laziness and impatience. I don't want to go and get money. I just want to crack on and get it done. So let's just build it ourselves and MVP it and then sort of get it better and better and better. But sometimes I think we could be bolder with the difficulty of the work we do is that we're working with teams that are in systems that don't want to change. most organizations don't want to change. Like most of us don't want to change. I don't want to change particularly, right? You probably don't either. So why would organizations? And yet we're working with the teams that are in charge of change. And we want those organizations to be bolder, but there's no point us being bolder with those teams because that's just bullying.
Mm.
Those teams know they need to be moving faster and the organization needs to be moving faster, but there's only a certain amount they can do to make that happen, and us kind of pushing them about and saying get on the floor and give me 20 isn't
Yeah,
really
it's
going
not
to.
going to work, is it?
So I sit with a constant question about how are we bolder with the organizations while having empathy and being supportive to the teams that know full well that the organization's going slower than it
It
should.
strikes me as quite a tricky balance,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. So we're the other strand of work that we're now growing is working with leaders in organizations. And that is probably my personal happier place where you get to work with the sort of top team and help them work through all the reasons why they're not. And as long as one of them has said, we need to get on with this, guys, as long as it's not us coming in and saying you should, because that doesn't work. If one or more of that group are keen to crack on, we can usually help them get the right mindset.
Mm.
And there's always a moment where you get to, everyone's complaining about how it's not going to work, it's too hard, and they don't have the clout, and if only they were the government, and you get to go, just look up, guys. And they all, look up at the ceiling and you go, is there anyone above you? And then they realize, no, they are actually the exco, and it really is in their hands. But it's so easy to feel powerless in this space that sometimes you just have to remind them of their power and the reasons they should be doing something. It might be commercial, like you won't have a social license to operate in some of your countries if you don't do something. But it might also be legacy, to your point earlier, that actually, so lots of leaders say that their kids come home and say, what are you doing about it, Dad?
Fair question.
Yeah. So that's the bit I'm keen to do more in, and that's the bit we are actually starting to do more in.
And in terms of your view of your role as the CEO, but let me ask you a couple of questions about that. I mean, let me start with an easy one, right? There's often this debate about should you work in the business or on the business,
Oh,
which comes from people that run big businesses that have a tendency to be too tangled up in the detail. But actually, if you're in a small business, it's very hard to do it the other way. If you're in a small business and there's only a handful of you, or however many people it is, it's very difficult to kind of step back. I mean, what's your take on that issue about being in the business or working on the business? I mean, just give us your
yeah,
take
it's
on that.
really hard, isn't it? I don't think I've got the ideal solution. I tend to do the first I tend to do the first engagement with a big organization. And we always work in pairs, though, it's worth saying. And so I will take one of the team into somewhere, but I might not do the follow-on engagements. And with our training programs, I usually design or co-design our training programs, and so then I'll want to run them a couple of times, and then once they're up and running, particularly once they've been evaluated, all our programs are evaluated by Oxford Brookes. So once they're evaluated, we're like, well, that's probably not going to change dramatically. So now the team gets to learn on it. And I'm also worried about later, what happens if someone's not available. So we have to have a range of people ready to jump in. So it would be a really bad idea if I'm the only person that knows how to do everything. And we identified pretty early on that I was a risk to the business, in that, if I, got run over by a bus or burnt out, which is a bigger risk, that would be a problem if we hadn't built in capacity. I think the other thing is I've always been really keen to build a business based around products, and I'm not sure we've completely pulled it off, but we try not to talk about services. We try to talk about distinct products. That's quite hard when you work mostly B2B because organizations really want services. They want things to be bespoke to them. So we've tried to design things that have the ability to become bespoke, but they are kind of productized. That's with a view to whether we want to exit or how we can scale. So that's been quite important to the way we've built the business. And I suppose one of the great things about being a coach, because I'm still a coach one day a week when I'm not in the climate change coaches, I'm in my private coaching practice, is I get to talk to other entrepreneurs as their coach, and I sort of see the things they're doing well, and I see the things they're not doing well, and I often come off a call and think, need to have a word with myself about that because I'm doing that too. Yeah, I probably should we should change that. Or I get ideas. We come
Yeah,
up with ideas together for their business, and I think, why aren't we doing a version of that in our business? You
yeah,
know, so that yeah, I think you have to. I think the worst thing you can do, and I definitely have worked with business owners who've done this, is they just keep putting off the on the business because they just don't see it as relevant. And then what they do, what basically happens is you become led by your clients. You're not driving the change anymore. You're being driven by the many, many things your clients want to do. And so we spent time at the beginning of this year working on our theory of change because I could see that sort of coming on the horizon. I said, like, if we're not careful, we're going to be really splintered in lots of directions. We make loads of money, maybe, but we might all end up feeling quite dissatisfied. So shall we just sit down and say, like, what are we trying to do? What is in the no, not that? And what is in the this is what we're aiming for? And that, I think that really helped the team to see that there was some cohesion, but it also helped us as co-founders to be able to say, like, actually it is this now. And therefore the on the business work is all this stuff, and we've got a very compelling reason why we've got to do it now, as opposed to, oh, I should get round to that one day, which is what I've seen other business owners do.
yeah, yeah. It's a really interesting issue, I think, because part of the challenge of being a CEO is working out which is the bit that I can do best and which bits should other people perhaps do better than me or whatever. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's not an easy, I mean, it's very easy to ask the question. It's much more difficult to answer it, I think. But that ultimately is the crux of it. Um,
Well, not just which are the bits that I can do best, but also how do I hire someone for the bits I don't know how to do because I don't know how to do them. So we've definitely made mistakes of hiring people to help us who weren't very good. And I think what we've done well, and the bold question is we've very boldly got rid of them quite quickly in a nice way, but
yeah,
actually we're not the right fit. And but then that's helped us learn what we do need. And we've like sort of stumbled into the right person, having gone to the wrong. That is a problem. And that's why often I think entrepreneurs go, I'll just do it all myself because, I don't really know how to hire somebody to fill this gap. But
yeah,
even where you do know, I mean, I'm not terrible at design because I ran a creative agency, but I just don't have time for the switching costs mentally, so, and I know my limits. I'm not, a designer, but I can lay up a document, if I need. So all our early brochures I just made because we didn't have any money. And that was great. It was really useful. But there comes a point where if you've got like more than three things to try and get done in a week, like big stuff, not the little stuff, the switching cost is enormous of like your brain going there and then it coming over here. So we have a creative agency now, and we're there on a retainer, and we can just go, this is one for you. And it sort of hurts a bit because part of me is like, I could easily do that.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? It's that feeling that you could do it probably not really easily and probably better. But actually you have to devote time to other things. It's a really difficult issue there. Just want to pick up something you just talked about your team. I mean, one of the other interesting challenges of having a small team but trying to work globally, have a global impact. I mean, you by default you need to have a team that is very effective most of the time. I mean, you can't, there's no slack to carry lots of spare people or to have people that aren't performing or whatever. I mean, what's your take on building a high performing team and keeping them kind of focused and agile, particularly when the going gets tough and things are problematic? I mean, what's your take on those issues?
So the first thing I should say is that most of our team are contractors because in coaching, most people work as
Mm.
associates because they want to run their own businesses and work in lots of other people's businesses. And I see that as a benefit, not just in cash flow terms, but in terms of bringing in new ideas. Two of our team members teach at Cambridge Institute of Sustainable Leadership. I definitely want them to keep doing that because they bring loads of ideas and they bring credibility as a result of that, and just freshness. So I guess the big challenge to us was in COVID. Um, what I saw, which was interesting, was team members saying they felt guilty for the, am I doing enough? There's nothing to do. Just look after yourselves. I remember having to say that out loud, and the relief was massive. People, oh, thanks for saying that. And actually, we then got really busy because during COVID, people said, oh, I've got time to learn something now. I've got nothing else on for the people who didn't have small children. And so, we suddenly had loads of work to do. I think the thing that really helps us, because all the team are remote, even though most of them are in the UK, One's in India, one's in France. We are looking to take on people in Europe this year. So you have to be very specific about what you're asking people to do. You have to create projects and very concrete outcomes. And that's not because we don't trust people to do so. It's so that everyone's clear and you don't get halfway through and go, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. So you spend quite a lot of time thrashing out what are we going to try and do here and who is the best person to do this. And sometimes what I think is what we're going to do at the end of that conversation, I realize, no, I've got this completely wrong. Everyone's made it better. And now we've got a real plan we can work
And
to.
that's a really good discipline, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really helps when you're remote because everything remotely takes 5 times longer. So if I say to myself, I want to get this thing done, if I'm doing it on my own, I can have it done by the end of the week. If I'm asking 2 team members, I'm looking at a month to 6 weeks because they've got to fit it in among other things. And then that makes me much more realistic about what we're going to do. So we don't end up chasing 15 things at once and being over optimistic. We say, like, is this worth the time and the money? And that's quite a sobering, useful kind of diagnostic, I suppose. But yeah, definitely outcomes focused and play to your strengths as well. We have some team members who are brilliant at some things and some who are brilliant at other things. And it might not be obvious. So you learn that as you go along and you learn, oh, that person's really brilliant at this, even though they never told us they were. And then the final thing is that, well, 2 final things actually. One is that we always sit people down, ideally once a year, sometimes a bit longer, and we say, like, what would you love to work on and what would you absolutely hate to work on? And then they can say, like, don't make me do that kind of thing. And we go, great. Now we know we've just got this kind of list in our heads and on a bit of paper. But then the other thing is when people join us, we're quite tight on vetting. Not the original team who we knew very well and we knew were good, but new joiners, I watch a video of them coaching. So I know that what they're like as a coach, and we ask them to run a training and we give them a training outline, and we ask them to go and find some people to train, find a co-pilot, run a training, video it and send it to us. And we have 4 core competencies with a scoring sheet. Sorry, no, 12 core competencies across 4 areas. We score people against that and give them really detailed feedback. And we use that competency framework to help all of us, me included, improve with every job. So every time we deliver in a client, we sit down as a delivery team and we say, which of the competencies do you want to improve on this job? And what do you want me to tell you? How do you want me to give you feedback on whether you did it or not? And that's quite useful because it helps us keep learning. But it's also useful because coaches get none of that because they all work solo and nobody ever cares about their learning and development. And we wanted to care about their learning and development. It's obviously a benefit to us, but it's really a benefit to them. So we wanted to keep this feeling of team, even though we were on paper contractors. And so that's sort of how we do that. And we have an offsite every year. So the other piece about the geographical problem is very real for us, which is when we have an offsite, it costs a fortune because we have to bring people from all over the place and the travel is really expensive.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider if you do go global. Where are your people and how are you going to keep that feeling of togetherness? The other thing we have is we have a lunch and learn every other month where people come together and do not talk about work. That's the only rule. You learn from somebody who we've got, a guest speaker we've got in, and then we all have a chat about how we are. And then we have a team meeting in the off month where we talk about work. So we try to build in these times for people just to hang out with each other. But it is the coming together in Oxford once a year is probably the most valuable thing, but it certainly has a big cost attached to it.
I'm sure, yeah. And just to pick up some of the things you said about working people being all over the place. I mean, you're doing business in Berlin. I mean, I know this myself. Doing business in Berlin very different from doing business in Paris. Just and it gets even more complicated when you go further afield. I mean, what's your take on those kind of managing those kind of cultural nuances, if you like? I mean, do you have a view on how you manage people in different markets, and also how do you manage relationships with customers from different parts of the world?
That's an interesting question because I've never thought about that. And I think that's because I had such a multicultural client base in West Africa that I probably developed some way of doing it and don't even know I have. So I'm not sure I've got a good answer. I think there is a common language across sustainability and environment, And
Mm.
that probably helps, that we're all talking about the same problems. I
And
think
motivated to tackle them. I mean, you're working with people
exactly.
generally that are quite motivated, aren't
Everyone's got quite a global outlook. We have to be, right? And I think the other thing is that I guess as a coach, I'm probably asking a different type of question. So I maybe, I mean, I've been a coach like 13 years now. So before I started this business, I was a coach and I was working with people from all over the world then, one to one. So I'm probably quite good at building a relationship quite fast with a stranger, because you have to when you're working on Zoom with somebody. You either decide to work together or you don't, but you have to kind of drop into quite a deep level quite fast in that sample session. So I probably just do that. But and I don't, I also make time for small talk, which I'm not great at, and I don't really like small talk, if I'm honest. But I recognize that that first kind of 5 minutes of like, how are you today? Oh, it's really hot here, said the guy in Madrid that I spoke to earlier. Like just these kind of bits that just kind of settle everybody into the conversation. I probably
Mm.
um make time for that a bit. Oh, and then the other thing is thinking about personality types. People give you their personality type almost immediately,
Mm.
and just sort of kind of playing to that in a hopefully not too Machiavellian way is quite useful. The other thing to say, I guess, is that we have an unusual set of markets in that we have sustainability, which is often quite corporate, but we also work with not-for-profits, again, who found us. And I came from an NGO background. I worked for Save the Children for 6 years. And so I suppose I get their world as much as I get corporate world. And so that's quite helpful
Mm.
because I sort of know why they're doing it. But again, I see there's quite a big crossover between the susty teams and the
And if
NGO.
people are motivated, I mean,
Yeah.
there's going to be a crossover, isn't there? If they're not motivated, there's also a crossover in a more negative way.
Yeah. And I suppose that's, I mean, it really is true. The people I just don't gel with are probably the people that they want me to convince them that there's a reason to care about climate change. And I just can't. You can't convince somebody to care about it if they don't. You can help them connect, you can help them find ways that it matters to them. But if someone comes in quite antagonistic and denial, it's kind of a dead end conversation. But they don't tend to have found us. So it doesn't
Let
tend
me
to.
ask you something that's a bit more provocative, right? I mean, one of the things that interests me is the kind of hammer and nail thing. I mean, I used to work with a bunch of engineers once, and they wouldn't do anything unless they had a project plan. I mean, that was how they did things. They had a plan and a roadmap, and this is how it worked. And we do. Getting any kind of spontaneity. I mean, it was they just. And one of the things about coaching, and again, I'm not anti-coaching, but coaching people think, well, I'm a coach, therefore every problem is solved by coaching,
Yeah.
which I'm not convinced about, right?
Yeah.
And but in the role of the CEO, sometimes you have to say no. For example, I mean, there are some. I mean, that's a simple example, but there are things that are not just about being empathetic with people and understanding their perspective and all the things that coaches do really well. Sometimes you have to be on the other side of that coin. I mean, what's your take on that issue?
Do you mean when I've got my kind of running the business hat on, or
Yeah.
when yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting because what I told you, we've got these 4 competency areas and 12 competencies. Actually, to sort of dodge that question slightly, when we started running trainings and I started watching back the videos of my team doing trainings, I noticed that some of them were struggling to get out of coach mode. And
Mm.
so we developed 4 competencies: coach, trainer, facilitator, and colleague. And that was because I said, here, in order to make these people feel confident, we've got to teach them. We've got to say, this is how it is. And in this bit, we need to get their voices in the room. We need to be facilitators. And to be a facilitator, sometimes you have to say, you go in that breakout room, do this thing,
Yeah.
not this kind of long, flowery thing that maybe a coach would say. So we had to be able to switch modes. And the colleague one was because, it doesn't matter how great you are at those things. If you're really not nice to work with, we don't want you. So, there's the kind of fourth one about how do you interact with your colleagues. But I think that's that in a way that's the bit that I've learned a lot of by training non-coaches to use coaching skills. This has become more and more clear to me because they ask me this question, like how do I have something I want to get done while using a coaching approach? And so it's probably I read a book years ago that I got in a remainder bin at WH Smith called 10 of the Best. And it wasn't a great book, but it had an interview with a former CEO of British Telecom. Don't ask me who he was,
Right.
and he said the biggest mistake I ever made was when someone came into my office with an absolutely terrible idea, I would chew them out and send them off with a flea in their ear. And then I realized they'll never come back to me again. And so that's where the coaching approach comes in. It's like, tell me about your terrible idea, unravel it in front of me, and you'll probably realize it's a terrible idea before I have to tell you. And then you'll come back to me next time.
Mm.
So sometimes there's a bit of like, just okay, I've got a knee jerk here, but you might surprise me. So, let's work it out together. But sometimes I think the other thing is that people think that coaches are terribly nice to people. One of the reasons I got into coaching was the opportunity to be challenging to people, because people, when you've got a good relationship with someone, they want challenge.
Yeah.
I've never had a client say, "Don't challenge me." There's quite the opposite. So that's what I like about sales conversations using a coaching approach. And we actually trained our team to think that way when they're in sales conversations. It's not about selling something, and you taught me this as well. It's about finding out if you're the right fit for them. And sometimes that means actually being quite almost giving them the off ramp all the time. Like, really? But are you sure you need this? Are you sure you're ready for this? Do you not think maybe, have you tried that? And so it isn't that we're the solution to everything. In actual fact, a lot of the time we're trying to find out, are we really going to have an impact here? Because if we're not, I don't want to put my team in there because I'll just be demoralized.
You're
So
absolutely sure. You don't want to waste people's time, your own and
or
theirs.
else, anybody's. And the other thing I learned about business from being a coach was you don't want to make a sale at the expense of your future reputation. If you make a sale to a team that doesn't really need you, or to an individual if it's coaching, and they go, yeah, yeah, we worked with them. Yeah, I mean, it was all right. I mean, it was fine. I mean, we needed somebody and they were there. You don't want that testimonial.
No, absolutely not.
You want the people to go, they were, oh, thank God they came. And so you need to find that out in the diagnostic before you ever take them on, because that's a future risk. Otherwise, you want them to be recommending you right, left, and center, like the Canadians did, so that suddenly you've got all these other clients. You don't want the easy money in exchange for the bad reputation. And again, that's when people come off diagnostic calls with us and sometimes say, "Oh, thanks so much. I didn't expect to be coached." And I think, I didn't coach you, but they felt like they were heard in a deeper way than they normally would have been. And that's great, because if they came away thinking, now I know what I need and it's not them, that's just as much of a win, because
Yeah,
they've got some clarity. And also, we're not going to be doing something that's not necessary.
yeah. So when you look back on that journey, I mean, what is it that you're most proud of?
Oh boy. Um, there are lots of little things. I'm proud of the fact we bootstrapped, actually. I didn't expect to say that. I always felt like, oh, maybe we should have got investment. But I think bootstrapping gave us flexibility and freedom, and it got us to stick to our values. I'm really proud of the fact we became a B Corporation. I'm really proud of the fact that two of us wrote a book, me and one of my team, during the pandemic while I was pregnant. Because lots of people have read that for 25 quid who could never afford to work with us. And that's really nice. I'm proud of the fact we spoke at COP when we were basically a nobody, and somebody said, "Do you want to come and speak at COP?" And that was a huge shift for us. Um, and I guess I'm probably most proud of the fact that most of the original team that came together to test a crazy idea for free in the rain in December 2018, almost all of those people are still in our team today.
Well, that
Mm.
tells that in itself tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, is there anything that you wish anything that you know now that you wish you'd known at the beginning?
Oh, be more focused, be more strategic. I'm a massive tactician. I'm sometimes too tactical. So we I did a lot of things for free for people that were not really on strategy. They were sort of on the side of it. And I don't want to be one of those people who says, my time is too important, I'm not getting out of bed for da da da. But there were a lot of things that really didn't serve us, that kind of distracted me. because I didn't want to say no and be mean, and and actually I just needed to say no, that's not me, and I've got much better at that. So I suppose, yeah, really valuing your time, really thinking what is the genuine cost of doing this, and recognizing that an hour's webinar is never an hour's webinar. It's like 3 meetings and a debrief, and like, so just being really like sure that everything is going to be useful. That's important, I think.
And any
That's
advice you give, anything I mean, you've just given a couple of useful bits of advice about being focused and so on. But any other advice you'd offer to somebody that's just starting out on a journey like yours, perhaps?
do you want advice about going global, or do you want advice
Yeah,
about generally? So I think um I guess the global bit that we haven't touched on here is probably related to law more than anything else. So just get some advice at the beginning about the implications of decisions you might make. We've got advisors. We don't have a board, but we have advisors, and they have been so useful at helping us see the consequences of decisions before we make them. We've also had completely free legal advice. People will often say, "Yeah, we'll give you half an hour." And they don't give you the real advice, but they clue you into the sorts of things
yeah.
you need to think about. That's really useful. And then think about how you can solve that problem a different way. So I guess I'm talking a bit cryptically. One of the things we want to do is one of the things we could do is we could work in the US. The US is the big one. The other one is India. Both of those places, the law feels quite overwhelming for a small company like ours. So then you have to ask yourself, what's the risk and return, and what's the real effort required? That's the thing I've got much better at in 6 years. I don't just go, yeah, we can make it happen. Now I say, like, what's that actually going to take? Oh, that's 18 months, not two. So, we had loads of coaches that we trained in the US, and some incredible coaches we really want to work with. But we were given legal advice, which may be wrong, quite ready to be challenged, that if we were to work with a client in the US and delivered by a team member in the US, but we didn't have an office in the US, that could be a problem.
Mm.
And that advice alone started to paint a picture in our heads of like all of the moving parts that would be required to satisfy American law. And we just said, yeah, we're not big enough to bite that off
Well,
yet.
not yet, anyway.
So we had to say no. And every time I say no to an American coach, it hurts, because I know some brilliant people over there I'd love to work with. But so then the alternative to that might be licensing our product to them, which means that they deliver it in their companies and we just get a license fee. And so it's not that you have to say no to stuff, but you need to get a
Slightly
full
different ways, isn't
of what you're going to do before you do it. And then I guess the other thing is to just go at your own pace. Don't let the potential dictate the pace.
it?
Because you have to feel comfortable and you have to be able to square every decision. So we had an opportunity to work in another territory, and with a completely new associate we didn't know. And very quickly we were whipped along in a discussion, and we kind of put the brakes on and said, hang on, why is it moving this fast? Why does it have to move this fast? We took lots of advice and we decided this wasn't for us.
Mm.
It just felt there were just a few red flags we didn't feel comfortable with. But it's very easy to find yourself, even when you've got a co-founder, looking at each other and saying, oh, we've got to get it back to that guy by tomorrow. And then,
Yeah.
hang on, what? It's a bit like buying a house. That's another process that's sort of sped up artificially. And it's your business. You get to make the decisions. You will have to live with those decisions.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's an important discipline. I mean, I always find it helpful to ask myself, why might this not work
yeah,
before leaping in,
yeah,
and just covering off the potential downside there. And quite often, it's useful to stand. Well, I certainly think it's useful to stand back a bit.
yeah. Well,
Because
and
I like those things. So I've got a sort of a bias towards jumping in, and it's not always the smartest move.
and I think there are lots of people who have a bias the other way towards not jumping
Yeah,
in. And that question can be quite useful to go, oh, actually, there is no real downside.
yeah,
The downsides, we lose 600 quid or something, in which case, well, let's just let's risk 600 quid. But if the downside is the whole business goes under, we probably want to be a bit slower about that. But there is some of us see the business going under when it's a 600 quid loss.
Yeah.
So we need to, both sides need to kind of rationalize. The thing I would love to give my co-founder Zoe a shout out for is that she is very good at um, saying no to me. And that's really important. So I'll say, here's this thing that needs doing, and I think we need to do all these things. And she'll say, yes, 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 no, 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 no. Like you're trying to do too much there, or you're being too generous, or they're not expecting that. Like just this is enough. And that has meant that we don't burn out. We don't over deliver, more than the over delivery we should be doing. But it is also the thing I really value about our relationship as co-founders is having someone who will actually take work off my plate rather than
Yeah.
add more onto it. Because sometimes co-founders can just kind of, spiral into optimism together. And Zoe's very good at going, that's a great idea, but that stuff is just extra. Let's get rid of it.
Yeah. 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 Two last questions, really, just before we wind up. So, first one, tell us about what exciting things have you got on the agenda at the moment? Just looking forward.
We are about to start a big project with a very well-known university. I can't say any more about it because we haven't got a contract signed yet, but we're literally about to start, where we will be testing our approach with leaders alongside two other quite well-known approaches. And we're part of a program of theirs, and our kind of leadership coaching program around getting leaders to take action on climate is one of the approaches being evaluated. And it's a huge honor to have been invited to be part of that project. And it's a 4-year program. So
Very exciting, I think.
exciting for me is we'll come out the other end and we'll either say we've got an amazing product here and someone's just springboarded us into the market, or we'll say that was a disaster, let's never talk about it again. But hopefully the former. And then the other thing, which is another test in a way, is that we are working with a big publisher, a really well-known international publisher, who we have trained their internal coaches. And we are helping them now to use those coaches to socialize sustainability through the leaders of that business. And that's another really exciting thing where instead of training lots of independent coaches around the world, we train a set inside an organization, and then they become an extension of the sustainability team. They already know the culture, they already know the organization, they're already coaching the leaders. They just didn't feel comfortable talking about sustainability with them. And so now they can be embedding and socializing that strategy, which is they've got a brand new sustainability strategy. They can be doing that in a way that the one person who runs sustainability never could.
Yeah.
Because they have
leveraging people's capabilities, isn't it?
Exactly. And so that's hugely exciting. That pilot is running from next month till February next year. We're building in evaluation metrics. We're building in control team that won't be coached. So we should have by the end of it a really good idea of whether that works or not. And that really actually is down to our ability to do both of those programs is down to the fact that we have spent quite a bit of time now working quite closely with Oxford Brookes University, where I'm an entrepreneur in residence. And Oxford Brookes have really taught us a lot. Karen Cripps in particular, Oxford Brookes have taught us a lot about setting up projects to really be able to measure impact and to have impact. So I can't thank them enough as well, actually, for the way they've changed our business to make it more rigorous. So yeah, those two things are really exciting.
Lots of interesting stuff you come out of that, I would have thought. One final question, and this really relates to, I mean, what's behind the question is the way AI is impacting on lots of things. I mean, what's your prediction? If that's perhaps too strong a word, but what do you think is going to happen in your industry over the next few years?
I honestly don't know. I was talking to a photographer this weekend about how AI could change photography, and we were both reflecting because I trained as a photographer. And I remember in 2008, people saying photography's dead. It's all about video now. Buy a still camera that shoots video and you'll be fine. And of course, photography wasn't dead. And they're saying something now again. Photographers are dead, and it's all going to be about AI. I think it's going to be a bit more nuanced than that. I do think that if I sat here and said it won't affect coaching, I'd be absolutely deluded. It absolutely will affect coaching. It already has come in to some extent. I think the bit of coaching that we do that might be hardest for AI to do is when someone says one thing and means another, which is most of what we're doing. When they say, oh, yes, we absolutely want to do something about climate change, but actually all their body language is saying I'm running in the opposite direction. We can spot that in a way that AI maybe couldn't. But the kind of boot camp coaches of like, when will you do that? How will I know what you're going to do? The grow model type stuff that will go to AI quite quickly, I think, because that is quite formulaic and it is logical. And so those logic conversations could be replaced. I say all of this, and yet we have young people who are quite happy talking to bots as if they're human.
Mm.
And that, again, that's an unknown quantity for us because the people we work with are probably in their mid 30s to mid 50s, mid 60s. And that would just seem nuts to them. They wouldn't do that. But there are a new generation coming up for whom that is second nature. So I honestly, I think if I gave you a prediction, it would probably be, a finger in the air
Yeah.
and
It's certainly going to be interesting the next few years. That's my take on it. So,
yeah. And I reflect a lot on my great aunt Margaret, who was she was 90 something when she passed away. And Margaret never stopped redrawing her map of the world. So when she was in her 80s, I moved to West Africa. She went to her local library and she said, I see you've got free computer classes. I said, yes, we have. She said, what's a computer? And they said, well, it's one of these. And she said, I'll have the free classes. So she learned, having only ever used a word processor, she learned how to use a computer, how to send emails so she could communicate with me because she couldn't send me long letters anymore. And she was right up until the end, uh, on the kind of pulse of where society was. She didn't say, I've stopped my map of the world when I was 50 and I'm not going to, and everyone else can keep pace with me. I don't have to keep pace. She kept redrawing her map of the world. And I want to do that too. However icky and uncomfortable it feels, frankly. And it does. I think we have to keep redrawing our map as AI takes over.
absolutely. Yeah. Charlie, thank you. I mean, that's a fascinating conversation and really good to hear that the progress you're making. Like I said at the beginning, I mean, it's a really important thing you're working on. So, it's great to hear that things are going well and that you're doing such interesting stuff. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and energy and your thoughts and ideas as always.
Thanks, Paul. It's lovely to see you.
See you soon, Charlie. Bye bye.